Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of PitchUs. My name's Tim Cooley. I am the author of the Pitch Deck book. Super excited to have Classic as our celebrity guest today and Dima presenting his company. Classic, please introduce yourself.
Classic, folks call me the Inquisitive Outsider. We have this brand that's focused on telling startup stories and giving it the energy that's needed. I feel like it's missing at times. So I try to be as excited as the founders are about what they've created.
Awesome. Well, Dima, thank you so much for being here. Please share your screen and then pitch us.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Honored to be here. Let me share my screen. Hi, everyone. My name is Dima Sirotkin. I'm the CEO of a company called PANDATRON. What we do is essentially helping corporations with change management. So if you worked in tech or you worked in startups, small companies, you might not even be aware of it. But it's essentially a huge problem. But before kind of coming to that, I would touch a bit upon kind of the meta problem, as we say. So we're living in a very kind of interesting age. As a lot of consultants say, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. A lot of things are happening. Technologies ever speeding up. We see that people can become reactive, change resistant. There is a general decrease in well-being, performance in the workplace, and it's difficult for organizations to adapt their capabilities and calibrate to increase collaboration, communication, to create value. And as a result, it's quite logical to think that we need to improve our adaptive capabilities when the technology improves, to organize within this kind of complex and novel situations. And you might have heard of technologies, but you probably haven't heard of psychotechnologies. So you might think of literacy. We haven't actually been born reading, right? So it's something that we actually learn as we grow, and it sort of becomes part of us, and it enables how we view the world. And you can think of other technologies of this term that we can develop to actually help us achieve insight, cultivate wisdom, become more mature, emotionally intelligent. And that's kind of what initially inspired me to go into the whole area. That being said, that's all kind of fluffy and abstract, but luckily we found a niche that also seems like not many people know about, where this also coincides with a very huge demand. So, as I mentioned, change management or corporate transformation is when a big organization is trying to make a strategic change, implementing new software, restructuring, mergers and acquisition. Typically, it's huge organizations like our clients typically are like around 50,000 people on average. They typically use training, they use communication, and 70% of those programs fail, according to McKinsey. And just to give you like the magnitude of the problem, Nike spent like 400 million and 5 years on implementing an ERP system, enterprise resource planning. And then they had to actually double that timeline and double the budget in order to actually go through with it and manage it at the end of the day. So as you can imagine, it's huge, and often the budgets are in billions. um, at the same time, our clients know that the issue is not so much the technology; it's really the people, the culture, mindset, behavior. And one of the tools that people have thought about for a while is coaching, executive coaching, business coaching. The problem is it typically costs $500 per hour, so it was impossible to scale it. Now with AI, it suddenly becomes a possibility where suddenly we can give it to thousands of employees, and instead of charging $500 per hour, we can suddenly charge $5 per month. So on one hand, it's about scaling this support and support with like understanding what the core issues are, understanding with like setting goals, following up on that to every employee, even if there are thousands. On the other hand, it's also about when we coach hundreds or thousands of people through Slack or Teams, with the chatbot, we can also collect a lot of data through these conversations. We can aggregate it, anonymize it, and then look for kind of insights. What are the systemic issues in these organizations? And when we present those, often the companies are super surprised, and it's essentially replacing HR surveys that don't tend to work as well. They usually go once per year, and then we ask people, oh, how do you like your work-life balance on the scale of 0 to 10, but it doesn't really tell you much concrete things. Um, as you can imagine, the time is now. I mean, on one hand, progress in generative AI created a lot of trust. Like I think in 2022, before ChatGPT came out, companies were like, oh, well, chatbots, that reminds us of like banking chatbots that never work. Now it's like the next hot thing. Recession also generated a lot of demand for automation. Like clients come to us and they're like, hey, we used to use McKinsey, we can't afford them anymore. Can you help us? And there's a widespread adoption of Microsoft Teams and Slack already since a couple of years due to COVID, which is essentially acting as an infrastructure for us where we can integrate and kind of bypass a lot of cybersecurity issues. And change is now kind of a constant. So it used to be a project-based thing where you do like digital transformation or agile transformation. Now it's becoming a constant as the technology is ever accelerating. So last year we've done like 20, 30 people pilots. We did around like 150K in revenue. Some big companies you might have heard of like SAP, maybe Konecranes. So most of this are like around 50,000 people. This year though, we are scaling. So one of our top clients, Skanska, is like intending to scale it to older employees. Outokumpu is a steel manufacturer. They're scaling it to like 1,000. With Electrolux, we're starting with like 600, and then the idea is to scale it to 10,000. And another thing that is not mentioned on the slide was happened just recently, but like BCG is signing us up as a vendor, the Boston Consulting Group, and they actually want to resell us to their partners. And so we project getting close to like 1 million ARR by the end of this year. We've seen that the model works. Actually, to like our own surprise, because like when we were starting 3 years ago, so we've been at it for a while. Chatbots weren't the thing. But the technology grew tremendously. And now, working with like Skanska, for example, they started with like more than 100 leaders. It was like 50K in revenue. The adoption rate was really high. The retention was really high. And more importantly, they said, hey, we achieved more than we usually achieve with corporate training. And we have achieved similar results that we typically achieve with executive coaching. And as you might remember, executive coaching might cost like 100 times more. In terms of like the go-to-market, so we typically sell to like this big corporations that are in heavy industry like manufacturing, construction, logistics, typically more than 5,000 people, closer to 50,000 often. The buyer is actually not HR as many people think. It's often head of change management, head of transformation, CIO, head of innovation. We measure results by inviting researchers, or like in sales or digital transformations, you can just look at like very specific KPIs like adoption of software. And then we sell either direct or through partnerships with consulting firms like BCG. The market is surprisingly big because like not many people have even heard about it. But like just as one data point, like I talked to JP Morgan and they're like, yeah, we are going through cloud transformation. The budget is 13 billion and 15% of that is spent on staff training related to that. So that's like almost 2 billion just on one project. And they know that 70% of those projects fail, right? We essentially are first to market because we've been in it for a while, and it's also one of those like niches that not many people in Silicon Valley go for. When we talk to clients, they say, look, like we don't know of any alternatives. There's competition in the HR space, so like potentially it could catch up with us. So that's why like being first here and aggregating as much data as possible, I think is very important. As I mentioned, we've been at it for like 3 years. So started initially with human coaches actually in 2020. So got some data from that and then went for like a hybrid. I think another differentiators is that many companies in the field are targeting like small companies versus we target really big ones. And so we integrate with like Microsoft Teams and Slack. We collect the data, which is also another thing that you can't really do with like small amounts of people because it's not confidential. Team-wise, I've previously had an exit, had a background in management consulting, and then second founder is ex-coach, sales director, third co-founder, ex-Amazon, MIT, 3 times founder, and then we have a few employees helping us on this journey. And the last thing I would say is that we just recently raised a tiny seed round, but still open to follow-ons. Probably will do seed. And this is some of the companies that are on our cap table right now. I guess the most famous is probably Michael Antonoff, who co-founded Oculus, the VR company that they sold to Facebook. And present in both Europe and San Francisco. Thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. So what we'd like to do is start off with things that we liked And so Classic, please kick it off for us.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say that I love that. I guess is a bit of a pro and a con. I love the reference to the Nike reference when you were saying like it seems like you just can't do it. It was a great joke. It was like why I was like why is it buried
Yeah,
in there? But because not only did it resonated with me initially, like hearing it, knowing the brand, knowing the focus of the brand, and seeing that like I wish there was more there because it really helps to be able to visualize the problem and kind of like see it in sort of like a real world application, sort of like perspective. I think what you're building is awesome all across the board, especially that that is something that I have heard is an issue. You know, the company gets brought and then we have to adopt new systems. We have to go about this. Is my job at risk? So on and so forth. And so to kind of like ease that process of making people more interested in buying into it versus being fearful of the unknown to come with it, I think is I think is a beautiful direction. I'm actually like really excited about getting into the cons. So there's a couple things.
okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because we give we do this a lot, and we actually really like helping people, so it's easy to pick
Yeah,
out like the cons, if you will. I like to call them areas of improvement. But to add to that, I really liked your energy. It's clear you know what you're talking about. I think we can help with the communication as a whole. But this is a really interesting product, and I use Teams literally every single day. And I would say there's complementary things that already exist and to add value to what you're doing within the teams, right? It's like Ask IT or whatever, right? Like it's very similar, but that's like I would call that old chatbotting, like you mentioned. And the new chatbots, we're not even sure what they're going to do yet. So very interesting space. I think you're probably at a really good spot. So your traction's awesome. So great job on that. I think that's, I mean, it's you're doing some good things. So those are my pros. And now areas of improvement. Class,
yeah,
kick us off.
yeah. I was gonna say it would have been good to get. I mean, not to. I know you can't like fully go in depth, but it'd be good to know how it is engaging the folks and helping to quell that overwhelming feel. Since you said it's more bottom up versus top down, so that means it's going right to the people that would be affected the most and trying to get them over the hump. And it's I know the introducing, like you were saying, the introducing of new things can be overwhelming. That change is hard. People tend to provide value or want to support things that they understand, and so introducing another thing that they probably wouldn't understand. I'm curious as to how it helped people like be okay with that change and be okay with this process in itself enough to be able to offer the feedback needed to be better.
Makes sense.
Yep. Any other things? You keep going if you have a list.
Yeah. Since you said there's some competition in the HR space, how do you work to get the HR folks on your side? I thought it was interesting that those weren't the initial sales contacts. Like when you were going through it, that's all I was thinking. Like, oh man, this is amazing HR tool. So one, I'd be curious as to why HR hasn't been the point of contact. What made it easier to sell to folks in these other spaces? And then how do you get the HR people on board? Because those are the folks that have to deal with the people that deal with this, especially the ones that maybe didn't take to it too well, or whatnot. Since that's that's the people side of the company. It would be good to see like how that process. I know you couldn't give it all away here because then that's like let them know the special sauce. But if you just can kind of tap into that a little bit on my end because that is initially what I was thinking. Like, well, why? Were they all put by it? Did they feel like it was kicking them out of their job, or like how does that
We,
work?
yeah, we initially started with that, but the core challenge there is that it's a nice to have. When you come in and you're like, oh, let's do leadership development, or let's support your employees and well-being, or whatever. And change management was one area that we found where there's a very specific problem with like $1 billion budgets, and people responsible have the budgets to actually address that as well, and they really care about it. So I think that that's at the core. And then how do you kind of like bring them on board? I think it helps a lot that usually the executives kind of buy in, and then they bring the HR person and they say, hey, we want this tool, please execute. So it's kind of like the decision was kind of already made, and then they are there to help us actually move it forward, introduce it, maybe kick it off. So in that way it's kind of a lot easier because they already kind of got the sign off.
Yeah, and if you don't buy in, then that's your bad. But yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm curious as to how they end up taking to it because at the end of the day, like once you get that cosign from somebody trusting, it is a lot easier to then take that next step. But it's still like those various hesitations. So I'm curious about the feedback around. Again, a lot of those reasons that made it easier for everybody to kind of like consistently uh, partake and participate to the point where you're getting all this data. There's something there that makes it feel friendly and lovely, and I'm fine with going through this process. And even if I'm not, maybe it's just a little bit easier um, than most other surveys and things. It's kind of like built for that. So it would have been a little good to like kind of see some of the process, even if it's just screenshots. What does the dashboard look like? What are those steps? The interface surrounding it. I'm curious as to like all those different things that are making people want to say like, yeah, I'll try this thing that maybe we don't really need, but at the end of the day is going to become. I think people are going to start to understand it as a need before they probably thought it was, but since it's so expensive, we can't consistently do it all the time. And now that the fact that you brought down those costs is something that people are probably more willing to investigate. And,
Exactly.
and and so yeah, it's a number of things I think we're kind of left to the imagination around process system and all those things.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
let me add to this. So, let's just start at the beginning. I think your background is really important for a product like this, right? Being in a management consulting, um, you've seen why this tool exists, right? So I think the way that you started it off did not take me down to the path to where we were going eventually with the product. And I'm
Yeah.
going to say it this way, all decks eventually get to getting all the information out there for the most part, right? But I think if we can cut out some of the fluff, it will give you more time to do like what Classic was asking. So I don't believe the beginning was that strong. That the psycho, whatever, I don't really believe you needed that. If you do think you need it, I would really think about removing words because I want to focus on you and listen to you communicate. I don't want to read. And when you've got like that much text, I'm reading and I start to zone you out, and that's never a good thing, right? So, secondly, to that point, I think that when you build that beginning, remember your background builds to the problem that you discovered. I think you can lead into why change management, right? Not necessarily that you're you you mentioned like you were like a new tool for change management, but you're really facilitating the change. And so you can talk about the data with training's the issue in change management. It always is, right? Um, and so you can say like, look, I did this for X number of years. One of the biggest issues we had was training, and and so we started off with this tool that was like an executive coach, but we found out there was another use case for it. Therefore, we built this new product market into this space. And I think that is what you said, but I think if you get there, and
Yeah.
then I think in this case, because you have a use case, I would say, look, here's how we used it here, and go to into Classic's point, you can kind of walk me through, you're a consultant, walk me through the change management process of using your tool, and then what their beginnings were, what their the effect was, and then you can go more into the tractions and things like that. I think that's a much better story than what was presented. um
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we didn't get was what your fee is, and I know that you sell through vendors, um, but we had no idea what that looks like. And so I do think you need, we 30% on whatever they charge. Here's what the going rate is for the end user, or whatever the things are going to be. That
Yeah,
really starts to ground us in understanding the market as a whole, right?
yeah,
And so it does make sense that you're going to partners. And I don't know if pricing is proprietary, and if it is, you can say that, but just, I
mm,
don't think it is. But
yeah,
um, okay, so a couple things. I really liked your team. You guys are very intelligent. I think it would be, how you did all of those logos at the very, very end slide. It might been good to bring that sooner into that
mm,
advisory. Like, look, we have this solid team, and all these logos are our advisors as well. Just something to think, try it out. Um, yeah, I think that you could have reframed the problem a little bit better. Again, I talked about that beginning part. Like we
yep,
we got there eventually. I think we could have just got there 3 minutes sooner.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Um, but yeah, so that's really all the feedback I have. I think you have all the components there. Um, Thanks for ending on an ask slide. That's really important to me. If you've watched any of my LinkedIn posts or anything. So great job there. And then the final question, do you have any questions, Dima? I want to make sure. Usually this goes for a little
No,
while
I think it
longer.
makes a lot of sense, right? Like I think the core things I wrote down, for example, are kind of like presenting the user journey and the use case
Yeah.
as kind of the centerpiece of the story. I think that also makes things more clear. It makes sense.
Yep.
We actually do that in sales, but for some
Yeah.
reason not in the investor deck.
Well, I think that's a
Um,
good point because a lot of people think that you're selling investors, and you kind of are, but you're not selling me on the You're not selling me. You're not selling. I'm not buying from you.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
it's the same journey, right? Like they had
yeah,
this problem, we did our thing, and now they're amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You
I think like
sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah. More than anything, like selling us on the possibilities, the potential, the fact that like somebody entered here, and because of what you offered them, they became this much better, and this is where they are now because of that.
Yeah,
And so that journey helps. But then also like just taking a dose of your own medicine when you were saying that like going off of Tim's point, uh, when you were saying that like you started at the top and then let everybody else know that this is what it is and that's why folks buy in. Same thing applies to you and this. Like this is what I do, and if you kind of come in with that, this is who I am, my experience, the successes associated with it. It's like in a way where it's not all wordy, right? Like I can just see that it's like I believe you, and now I'm listening, just like I believe the boss when he says this is what it is, this is why it works, and this is why it's going to be good for you. It's like, well, I don't think you would steer me wrong, and so I'm paying attention to this now and like super diving in. So leading with that, and then going into not only this is who I am and why I'm a monster, but like look what I've done. Look at the journey that they've gone through and why they're better because of it, which then makes me go back to like, yep, that's he is a monster. That's that was right. And
mhm.
so it's literally a storytelling journey where like I'm coming in, I know why you're the dragon slayer, I understand the dragon, and now I feel as though I can slay the dragon as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that was actually my second point that I wrote down of like, yeah, maybe starting with the background because the background is strong. So maybe I can kind of start a little bit with the team, either the whole team or maybe just my story as
We just
like
start
the
with
kind of
you. Just connect you to the problem and why
yeah,
you
yeah,
have
exactly.
to solve it, right?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Um, yeah, yeah. I think these are the main points, and then I wrote down like small things like
Cool.
putting the VCs maybe on the
Yeah,
team slide,
just some
etc.
little things. Well, this has
Yeah.
been great. So we always like to ask the final question is based off of what we heard today, classic, would you take this company to due diligence?
Yeah, I would because it works even with the just a little bit I do understand. I understand things working, and I and my curiosity would be around this whole process more than anything. So I would want to dive in a lot more just to watch it flow to become even more of a believer because I believe you. If we got to this point to the point where you sold enough people to kind of hit those milestones that you have in place. I want to learn a little bit more, and dive in and see how I could support you in the storytelling, because I think that's the only thing that, like, once that's shored up, then you're off to the races.
Yeah. I'll agree. I know you didn't have a legit ask in this slide. I don't know if you're actively raising money today, but I
Yeah.
would take this on to due diligence for those same reasons. The problem once we got there was really, really clear. Took a little bit to get there, but it's something I actually understand very, very well. And we know change managers have that same problem. So you frame that better, you'll get through it better. And then the traction is impressive. Your logos are impressive. And so why wouldn't we, follow up with you? So great job. Really great job. So,
You're a rock
look,
star, Dima. You're a rock
yeah,
star.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sure
thanks
we all
everybody for
are
being here.
on this
Classic for
call.
being our celebrity guest, Dima for presenting. If y'all need help with your decks, please reach out. Classic myself. Check out the pitch deck book. And if you need help with your financials, check out Forecaster. We have an amazing deal through the link there. And Jeff Erickson, who's not here, is one of our co-hosts. And so check it out, and we will see you all next time.